Let's go and get started. So we're going to talk about employee, I'm changing it up a little bit from the description, but we're going to talk about employee evaluation and then retention a little bit today. This is me. I'm the Audiovisual Experience Manager at Iowa State University. I'm in my 6th year at Iowa State. Prior to that, I had almost 20 years as a commercial integrator on the integration side. Very active about, if you haven't seen me yet, you will probably if you're involved in higher AV at all. Very active in ETC, I'm the member co-chair, I'm on the program committee, I'm board member-elect there, very active in AVIXA. I was 2018 CTS Holder of the Year with AVIXA, and go on and so forth. I write some columns. Our team won an award, it was all good stuff, right? So, Iowa State University, we are a public land-grant university founded in 1858. Our enrollment last fall was just over 30,000. Our high enrollment a few years back was like 34,000, so we're down. And actually there's a lot of people on campus who are like, that's a good thing, because when we were at like 34,000, we were like, we had nowhere to put students. We had, classes were too big. It was bigger than the university. So there's actually some people that, strangely enough, are like, this is actually a much better enrollment level for us. 10 colleges and schools, 100 majors. One of our claims to fame is the world's first electronic digital computer was invented in 1942 at Iowa State University. And Ames is a great little town, right? Often comes up in the top 10 lists of best college towns and those types of things. So. Just a few quick shameless plugs. If you know me, you know that it's not uncommon for me to do some shameless plugs. If you're not involved in ETC, you should be. Of course, I'm on the membership committee, so I'd be literally remiss if I didn't mention this. So ETC is a great organization too, formerly CCMC. You may have known us that. Just so much great leadership, some collaboration, amazing things. There's the QR codes that take you to the website. And of course, we're going to be hosting the next ETC conference here at Iowa State University in the fall, October 1st to the 4th. So please, everyone should come there. HETMA, you may have heard that mentioned a few times here as well. Higher Education Technology Management Alliance. One of the beauties of HETMA is it's free, will always be free, kind of like literally written into the organizational mandate of the organization. Its primary goal is advocacy. It's an advocacy organization, so it kind of promotes the needs of higher ed within the broader pro-AV community, and we are making a tremendous amount of headway in that and making a big splash. So a couple of great things, that was called the PRISM Scholarship. If you have individuals in your organization who are maybe in the underrepresented group and are looking to grow in their pro-AV skills, have them look up this PRISM Scholarship. It gets them a whole training set. They get free CTS training. They take the CTS training for free, or the test. They take the CTS test for free. They get an all-expense paid trip to Infocom trade show. They get a mentor assigned to them all year. It's a really great program. Would encourage you to check that out. And last plug is Higher Ed AV Media. Some really great podcasts and articles about all things higher ed AV, imagine that. The great thing is it's by and for AV professionals. We don't really have any third-party writers or podcasters. We're kind of just doing it all ourselves, so it's kind of biased for us. And this is the best part of this plug. If you have something that you want to say, please let us know, because we would love to highlight you and your work as well. In that, we're always looking for new columnists, regular columnists. So if you have something that you're passionate about, want to write about, let us know. We'd love to involve you there. So, all right, so quick agenda here. We're going to talk about performance evaluation, and then we're going to talk about how do you monitor and make sure that you're tracking where your employees are with regards to their satisfaction levels and their flight risk in your organization. And a big part of that is, that we're going to spend a lot of time on, is what we call shoves and tugs questions. And we'll get to that here in a minute, and we'll close with some Q&A. So So we're just going to kind of cover this really fast. Many of you probably have a really structured employee evaluation system at your organization, but if you don't, then I really want you to pay attention to this, because if you don't, you need to have one, okay? So evaluating your employees is the hardest and most important part of any manager's job, in my personal opinion. And to make it easy for yourself, you really need to have a structured way to evaluate them fairly, evaluate them accurately, the same way over time. So there's just a few things that can make this better. To me, one of the really important parts of a really good employee evaluation process, and this was mentioned earlier today, by the way, is giving your employees opportunity to evaluate themselves. So the self-evaluation. One of the things I find that's really important in that is it gives you an opportunity to see if there's a mismatch between, if there's a big mismatch between how they're evaluating themselves and how you evaluate them, then there's a communication problem. There's a problem of them understanding expectations, and that's on you, by the way, as the manager, if you find that there's this mismatch. But it really makes sure that we're all on the same page, right? That they know what's expected of them and why. So having them evaluate themselves and then you evaluate them, really helps you identify that early on.
Mike, when you're saying develop a form, are you saying you're working with HR, or are you doing this just for internal purposes?
So could be both and, right? So good question. We'll get to that in a second.
Dang it, jumping ahead, sorry. Just wanted to clarify and see what you were kind of thinking there, okay.
So, yeah, you need to have a standard form. If your HR people don't have one, you need to have one. And frankly, if your HR people's is lacking, you need to have one for yourself, right? So either way, you need to make sure that you have a good one, no matter who it's by, right? And so like at Iowa State University, the university process is like no structure whatsoever. You basically, at the end of the year, you check one box in Workday, which is our, employee management software, meets or exceeds or does not meet. You check one box, and you submit that, and that's literally, from a UHR perspective, that's all they care about, right? So IT services, then, as an organizational unit, created their own process and their own form, and so that's what we use primarily internally for ourselves to do that, right? So as you're developing that form, you really want to think about what your core values are and or key competencies, and we're going to kind of walk through that here in a second. So again, based upon core values. So you may recognize that top one, Aaron. And so hopefully I'm not sharing a super secret sauce for Mechdyne, but
it's literally on our website, so no.
So when I worked at Mechdyne, they evaluated all their employees on what they called the 4 Ps. Okay, so they were positive attitude, process-oriented, proactiveness, and then performance. Okay, and the beauty of what I really liked about their system is it was actually, they weighted the positive attitude twice of everything else, right? So it actually got 40% of your total score was in positive attitude, and the other 3 were in 20% each. And that was really critical to us because a positive attitude can make all the difference, and a negative attitude can take down an organization in a heartbeat. And so it really was good. Now, on the other hand, this is an example too, and this is what our IT services has come up with. In my personal opinion, it's bulky, it's too long, but it's what they decided to do, right? So they kind of broke it up into a couple sections. It becomes a really long form, so our core values are respectful, innovative, dependable, customer-focused, and campus partner. And then we have some key competencies that we're interested in tracking: ensures accountability, action-oriented, communicates effectively, plans and aligns, self-development, technical proficiency, and quality of work. And so, once you've decided kind of what your core values are, and you really should be not, you as a manager should probably not be doing that by yourself. This needs to be coming out of senior leadership, at the very least in your, unit, right? If not the whole university. I know when IT services put this together, they were definitely looking at the university strategic plan, their mission and objectives and those types of things, and making sure that they were trying to track, sync in with what the university was on a larger basis. So,
Mike, when I'm looking at like respectful and positive attitude, I'm thinking about some of the tensions we have sometimes in my organization where there are cultural differences around what that means, right?
Yeah.
And so we've had situations where, people have accused other people of being disrespectful when there's just, again, someone who came from a different place or, has a different understanding of that. So are there sort of, and you may be getting to this, but, how are you evaluating those, kind of squishy
Yeah.
sort of values?
That's a good way to put it.
Yep,
Right.
you should have a rubric. Is how you evaluate those things,
Right,
right?
well, that's the tool though, that's the
Look at
tool.
this
But
guy.
like what, how do you define respect? Who's defining respect? Who's
Yeah.
defining a positive attitude and how?
It comes with the culture of the department, probably.
So, it's a great question. Honestly, I'm not sure I have a perfect answer for that yet. I don't think it's really come up in our conversations all that much, so you're raising a really good question that I don't think we've had to address yet.
And just to kind of dovetail onto that, like, one of the things I remember when I was at the University of Texas, there's like a 360 eval, thing, where when we're talking about some of these things about, I really like that model one where the positive attitude, right, is like heavily weighted, right, because, people who are nice to be around, like, that's like so much of a battle. But, so I'm most interested in like, well, if there is a dispute, like do you have any thoughts or experiences like where you would go to settle that kind of thing? Because if you say, well, I feel like you don't have a positive attitude, well, my attitude is perfectly positive. It's those people that have the problem. How do you address that in a constructive way, right? Because I think it is the thing that can, so this is great, like what the rubric is, but like how do you, like, is it a larger kind of net that you're casting to kind of get more information about other people's opinions about how those folks are like interacting?
So, I will say as a part of our process, we do have the teammates evaluate each other too. And that scores, it's all done anonymously, but the manager sees what the other employees are rating each other on these types of things. And they're able to make comments, and I sanitize the comments, but I do present them when I'm doing their evaluations and say, by the way, paraphrasing here, but this is kind of what some of your employees or some of your coworkers were saying about it, just, so that right? And actually, that's been some of the most effective feedback, that's been made more motivation for change than anything I've said so far, is when they hear, oh, my teammates think this of me. Often I see them like really try and change, right? Even more than strangely, even more than what I seem to think of them, so, but.
Yeah, it does make sense, right? I mean, people are around you, right? Or, you feel maybe more accountable to the people who are working right next to you.
Right.
I guess, Mike, the administration of something like that, and then, because someone's going to say something that's going to hurt somebody's feelings, or they're going to bring up a shortcoming, and they're going, I'm going to seek my revenge. I know who exactly said
Well,
that.
so that's why we had to abandon that model, because as much as you sanitize, and I think it's also fair that there's some institutions that are a lot smaller.
Sure.
It's either that they can figure it out on some level, and you try to manage that, but the other piece is, if I tell somebody like that and they're genuinely trying to change, They want examples.
Mhm.
They want me to give them real-time examples of where that happened. And of course, from that, they figured out, well, maybe I don't know what those real examples are because your coworker fed that to me in a kind of a generic fashion. So we just kind of abandoned that. I want to go back to what we were talking about earlier, though, and the question was, how do they know how I'm rating them based on that? Well, it's because it's my responsibility to be telling them my expectations. This is what I think is a respectful environment. And it's critical that I get the message to each and one of them, so when I go to rate them, they know what I'm rating them on. So yeah, the matrix can be there to rate, but I have to set that.
So let me get to one more slide here, and let's see if that answers some of these questions, and then we'll come back to it if this doesn't satisfactorily answer where we're going with this. So again, having rubrics is incredibly helpful, and this is what we're trying to get at, right? So what does exceed expectations look like? Okay, you need to define that for them. What does meet expectations look like, and what does not meet expectations look like? And so that's what this rubric is supposed to do. So let me show you an example. Okay, so this is an example of the rubric for respectful. Okay, and again, there's still all kinds of room, especially for something like respectful. There's still all kinds of room for it's soft, it's squishy. People are going to have different opinions on this. But what you're trying to do, to the extent possible, in every area, you really want to have like some very specific things, like we have here, right? That you can point to and basically say, the reason that I'm rating you this way, and actually, what we used to do at Mectine, which was really great, is this would be in every section. And what I would do as a manager is then I would just take a highlighter, well, virtual, right, in Word, and I would highlight the areas in the first column, highlight the areas in the second column, highlight the areas in the third column that I think apply to them the most. And not everything, it would be hit and miss, right? But then also they would get to see immediately, right, well, I have more in the first column than anything else, so that's probably why they maybe rated me, in the exceed section, because I'm doing more of those things, right? And we can point to those things. So, having something like this is never going to take away all the debate, but it can help a whole lot by giving them a visual, very clearly written, this is what I look for to find somebody who's exceeding my expectations in this area.
So at Mectine, when we're hired, we are shown that. So we know what we're kind of graded on, and over the year, it's when you have the one-on-ones with your manager, your supervisor, they should be going over things that are issues like during the year, so that if you go to your annual review and things are surprising, in my opinion, then that's an issue with your manager that they should have brought up. There shouldn't be any surprises during your annual review. And I've definitely sat in meetings with my manager and they're like, did you have an issue with so-and-so today? If whatever you must have said must have rubbed them the wrong way or something like that. And like, I'll leave that meeting and I'll go apologize. Like, I was just trying to explain X, Y, and Z. And usually it's water under the bridge pretty quickly. But like, we're able to see this. And one of the things that's actually on ours is technically experienced but difficult to work with or something like that. I think that was one on the left that I got a few years in a row. So I need to work on it, and it was something I literally need to work on every day, and it hasn't been a checkbox on mine the last couple of years. So.
I really like this. This does completely answer my question. And the example I was thinking of, it was an example where other people in leadership at IT were describing a staff member as disrespectful because she didn't avoid conflict.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because she steps up to conflict and sees them as responsive.
Right.
So, yeah, and so there was a disagreement between me and the other directors about this staff member because I was following this, right? And but they were following avoids conflict as a.
Yeah.
So I love having, this completely resolves the squishy.
Honestly, even this is never going to completely resolve, but it helps like a whole
I think it's
lot.
pretty, yeah. I think that's pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
Did you have ChatGPT write that?
No, actually,
Right before chat.
yeah, I wouldn't, what was the book? This came from a book, actually.
The Deadly Sins of Employee Retention, I think.
No, we're gonna get to that book, but no, not that book. This is from, I don't know, I'll have to get back to you on that. So, but there is a book that this is from, that I can go, I'll get that for you before we're done here.
Sorry to sidetrack.
Yeah, no. All right, so, again, I mentioned the kind of, the most important and hardest part. What you really need to do is keep a running log. It's kind of what Aaron was saying. You really need to use your recurring one-on-one meetings to help track this, right? And so, on that note, let's talk about one-on-one meetings a little bit. So, one-on-one meetings are, and my graphics have disappeared, so I don't know what's up with that. But, so these are like recurring individual meetings with your employees, and these are vital. And they do allow you to opportunity to monitor their morale. It also gives you, as Aaron implied, that opportunity to give that real-time feedback, right? So, so there are no surprises at the end of the year. 100% correct. If an employee is surprised by something in their annual evaluation, that's on you as a manager. You've done something wrong, right? You have not been communicating effectively throughout the year to help them make sure they understand the other thing. The other thing I really like about the one-on-one meetings is it really helps build, to me at least, for my team, it's really helping build rapport and trust with my team. So I do either weekly or every other week one-on-ones with all my employees, kind of depending upon what their role is in the organization, right? Like my senior people I do every week, and some of my junior techs I do every other week, to keep track of them with these one-on-one meetings. But I have a very structured way even that I do these one-on-one meetings. So I ask a few questions repeatedly, and they get sidetracked from time to time, of course, but this is kind of the general flow of how I do these. So, I start with, okay, how's life, right? Like, how are you? What's going on? And this is more like keeping it light, finding out what their personal life's about. For my Monday and Tuesday meetings, it's like, how was your weekend, right? For my Thursday and Friday meetings, it's like, do you have any fun plans, for this weekend? We kind of hear, see what they have to say. The other thing I really like to do here is, if they were honest and shared, I've got this health problem, or my daughter's struggling with this at school, you've got then, to really build the trust, you get so many bonus points if you come back that next week and say, hey, how is that going, right? How's your daughter doing with this problem at school? How's your wife liking your job? Those types of things. It really, you gotta be genuine about it too, right? You actually have to care, and I do, right? But they have to see that, right? They have to see that you care. So we kind of spend a few minutes, we talk about that, and then we kind of like, okay, so what's going on work-wise, right? This is how I normally put it, right? So what's going on? So then they're like, okay, so they kind of then, kind of talk about, what have you done in the last week? What kinds of things? What are you planning on working on here the next week? And we kind of give a general rundown. This is more of a checklist, right? Kind of like, hey, these are the things that I did. Here's the things that I'm hoping to do in this coming week, right? We also talk about what issues, right? So what challenges are you facing, and how did you overcome those? And we talked about some of that as well. And then I always ask this question. I say, so what do you need from me, or how can I help? And this is an amazing question to really get them to, because the other thing is, I ask this question a lot, and they're like, well, you know what, I didn't want to bring it up, but God, this tool is starting to get kind of run down, and it'd be ready for a new one. Okay, buy a new one. And they're like, really? So, the more times that you can say yes to something when they come to you and say, yeah, you can help me with this, again, it gets back to that trust, right? And they're gonna come to you during the week even, between your one-on-ones and say, hey, we need this, you know, can you help me out? And, you know, then you're gonna hear these things earlier and you're gonna help them out, right? So,
Hey, Mike.
yeah,
Let's say you're trying to rebuild trust with an employee,
yep,
and they don't bring answers beyond very surface level to the second question. How much scaffolding do you do to kind of tease it out? So, like, maybe they're a little defensive because maybe a prior experience says, I'll tell you the minimum.
sure.
Or, I mean, I have very introverted staff.
Yes,
That-
right.
Yes, yeah.
Maybe they don't want to talk.
yeah, we do fine, yeah, I fixed that.
So,
Yep.
so there are some scaffolding questions we're gonna get to again, these are all
Another
great questions.
slide.
I agree.
You want to
so
conversation?
Everyone just shut up.
We have such a go-getter group here, right? Yeah. All right, so then the second half of the questions I ask are then are this, right? What? All right, and crash.
I saw him out.
And it's crashed hard.
I can't fix this, but I'm gonna walk up and pretend.
I mean, that's most of the room can probably.
Yeah, it's not loud. I'm just gonna. It's gonna have to take a quick reboot. So it'll go fast. So just talk about yourselves for 2 minutes. Coffee talk. Talk about yourselves.
Well, Mike, I went to the presentation you did at ETC in California, and I took back with this, some of that, and I see some of it more played out here a little bit more with more information and more detail. And I have been using some of this very successfully in the last year to get, you know, to allow people a little bit more of a platform to have that kind of one-on-one interaction with the big boss, and then, you know, and then my ability to document it up. Now, does this go into their evaluation at our school? No, it doesn't, because it's simply one of those evaluations that, did you do it or didn't you do it? Not how you did it, and getting into some of that detail. So, you know, I appreciate an evaluation to do that within your unit, your IT unit, but does that count towards their performance, final performance review at Iowa State University? So this is what gets them, because if I did that at my school, then they're like, that's nice done, but that doesn't matter. It's what HR allows you to do in that evaluation, which frankly, our school is very dissatisfactory, in my opinion.
So yeah, I mean certainly some of the things that yeah, so we're gonna get there, but yes, certainly some of the things that you're gathering in these one-on-one meetings, you know, are definitely gonna go into their annual review, right? And actually, to me, one of the beauties of these one-on-one meetings is you're allowing them to help you write their review if you get with them on a regular basis and you ask the right questions, and you ask the questions that are targeted toward the things that you have to evaluate them on,
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, right, it becomes like a whole lot easier come evaluation time, because you've got all these notes from all these one-on-one meetings all year long that you're looking at to build their.
So this past week example of how that worked out for us, I met with our event manager. He had shared with me that more clients on our campus are asking for a teleprompter. But our teleprompter, I didn't know all this, is 7 years old. It's BGA, and one of the panels is being held on by one screw because all the other 3 screws fell into the hole. And I'm like, you're telling me that it's holding on literally by one screw? He goes, yeah. I go, well, let's get on B&H right now and start looking at product choices that might work to, you know, it's going to be expensive. No, don't worry, let's just shop, let's look. And that was one of those things that in a meeting like that came out. So it's, you know, some small victories, but yet it's something that we needed, because the last thing I want to have is a teleprompter fail during our President's Day of the University.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
oops.
Yep. All right, so this is the second part. So I'm sorry, we're one-on-one meetings. This is the second part of what I ask in my one-on-one meetings, right? So, and this is where I really am having them help me do their annual evaluation for them, right? So I ask them outright, I say, give me an example where you met or exceeded expectations this week, right? And you really make them think, right? So, and actually, it's really, sometimes they get squirrely about this, right? You kind of like, look, it shouldn't be hard for you to give me an example where you at least met an expectation. So can we at least, okay, so give me an example, right, of where you met expectations, right? And then I kind of build on that sometimes, like say, do you have any, like beyond that, is there like just a win story that you'd like to share? And I say, that can be anything. That can be you personally, it can be a teammate, it can be the university as a whole. Where did you see a win story this week, right? And so we're kind of trying to get that out of them also. And of course I flip that around then and I say, all right, can you give me an example of an opportunity for improvement that you maybe can think of, right, coming up? Or are there any lessons learned that you've picked up this week that we want to make sure that we share with others so we're not repeating mistakes or we're not reinventing the wheel? And so we give them that opportunity as well. Now, asking them to self-identify opportunities for improvement, this will take time, right? You're going to have to really build a lot of trust with them, right? For them to really be open and honest with you about that. To me, one of the quickest ways to begin to build that trust, though, is identifying your own areas for opportunity for improvement. And I do that often when we have our weekly team meeting, and I do it publicly in front of the whole team and say, hey, by the way, I know this could have gone better. That's on me. It's an area where I need to do some improvement. Just want to let you guys know that I'm working on that, right? And so, the more that I can show that vulnerability publicly to them, that, hey, I know I have areas that I need to work on, and so can you guys, so it gets to the point where hopefully, they're going to give you more answers. So, and honestly, I don't always get an answer from them on this one, and that's fine, right? I mean, they're not always going to be able to come up with something, and honestly, maybe there really wasn't a good example that week for them on these two.
That's what I was gonna ask with the whole improvement thing. Is that something you do every week? Because I feel like if somebody was asking me that every week, I'd be like, oh my God, just stop already. You know what I mean? Like, I'll tell you if I'm having an issue, but like maybe a monthly, like you bring it up, I just feel like the whole when you say on a resume, what's your downfall? It's like, oh, I'm too fast at something. They're just gonna give you some generic thing that's gonna make it sound good but not bad, and it's like, if you really want a truthful answer, not bring it up all the time. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, so my team generally, at least my team, they don't like try to make stuff up like that, right? Like they'll either say nothing comes to mind, like great, no problem, right? So
Okay, that's good.
and I don't very often I don't push them on it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, now and then I'm like, are you sure?
Like you said,
But,
yeah. Don't make it weird, right? Yeah.
Right.
All right.
But when they do bring something up, it's often really good. One example that came recently is you know what? Yeah, we should have probably paid more attention that we had everything on the truck before we left, right? Because you know what? We ended up making 4 trips back to the shop for things that we forgot. And an area for opportunity for improvement is that we just need to pay more attention to make sure that we have everything the first time, right? And I'm like, perfect. That's great, And so, we do get some good stuff, right, from them from time to time on these types of things. So, all right, so let's talk about shoves and tugs, okay? So there's this book.
Is there going to be a demonstration, a physical demonstration?
Oh, no. So, it's a very small book. I encourage you all to get a copy. It's like $18 on Amazon. It's called The Deadly Sins of Employee Retention. And this is just one small section of this book. This book is really good stuff all the way through it. And actually, I was operating on the smaller Rev 1 version of the book. I literally bought this week because I'm like, ooh, I better have an example to show, right, of the latest and greatest book. But so this concept of these tugs and shoves come from this book. And so basically, these tugs and shoves, or shoves and tugs questions, you do them 1 to 4 times a year, and what you're trying to find is, so in the book, shoves are things that would promote a person to leave. Okay, like you're shoving them out of your organization, right? Tugs are anything that's promoting them or prompting them to want to stay, right, in your organization. And so what these questions are, this structured way to try and get answers out of them so that you can monitor and identify what these are. So there's kind of 3 types of optional questions and then like 1 mandatory question. And actually, I will say that he changed that up between these 2 books. And actually, I like the first book better because he really has it much more structured. I kind of left it more loosey-goosey on the second book, on the second read of it. But in the first book, he kind of lays it out as, so there's indirect, there's direct, and there's like blunt type questions that you can ask in both these areas. And then in both the shoves area and the tugs area, there's like 1 mandatory question that you need to ask each time. And so let's kind of look at what some of these are. So the indirect questions are designed, so if you really have somebody who's like lacking trust, what you're trying to do is you get them thinking in 3rd person, okay? Instead of, it's not about me, right? It's about 3rd person, right? So you can see some of the types of questions here, like, do you know any employees who have left? Yes or no, right? And do you know why they left? So you're not getting them thinking of themselves, but you may hear answers here from them that relate to challenges they're seeing, but they're putting them on someone else, right? And so this is a way to kind of work around it, right? And try and get them to understand. So again, like what are 2 or 3 things that you think others like least about this organization? Or can you imagine why somebody might want to choose to leave this organization? And so this is, these are good starter questions, right? That you can begin to get them to begin thinking about and asking with regards to this. So, over time, or you may have some employees like you can go right to direct or right to blunt, which is great. So if we go to direct questions, now you're kind of asking these same questions, but you're like asking it to them, right? You're like going straight to them. So, and this is this first question here is the question that he kind of, he basically says, like, everything really boils down to that one first question, right? He says, if you can get good answers out of that question, that's really the only question you need when you wrote the revised book. So he said, in the last 90 days, can you tell me about a time you felt really unmotivated or demotivated? Because this is really the root of what you're trying to find here, right? Like, what is making them unhappy? What is, again, prompting them to think about wanting to leave your organization? But then there's other ways you can kind of word that around, right? When was the last time you felt really demotivated? What are 2 or 3 things you like least about this organization? And actually, this next question, this is my favorite question, is if somebody asked you the single worst part of working here, what would it be? And I always phrase it like this, I'm like, all right, so you're at a party, and someone walks up to you, hey, you work at IT Services at Iowa State University. What would you say the worst part of working there is? So what do you tell that person at the party, right? And so we're trying to, get them to think in those types of terms, right? And then you really get to the point where, like, okay, now we're getting, like, real. You're outright asking them, has there been a point in the last 90 days when you've felt like leaving? And this is, now we're getting really pointed, right, in the questions. And if, and then if so, what caused it?
Is there a reason, like what's the why would you ask that question? Is it because they've done something or you're getting a feeling? Or are you just literally just asking people this question just for the answers? Or is there something behind that?
No, the idea is that you this is for monitoring, right? So you are proactively trying to identify.
You don't think that they're unhappy, you don't think anything, you're just literally just asking the question.
You 100% ask this whether or not you think that they're ready to leave.
Gotcha.
Because they might be ready to leave and you don't know.
Don't know,
it.
yeah, okay.
And that is the worst risk that we're trying to get rid of here, right? It's like,
Gotcha.
you got a really unhappy employee, they're a star employee for you, and for whatever reason, you know, be just likely to like totally miss it, right? Like, totally whiffed it, did not see this coming. You know, so what we're trying to do here is like prevent that, right? We're trying to proactively try and draw these potential issues out of them before they become a problem.
Got it.
The other thing is, I'm just gonna say, because I just, as I referenced in my talk, did stay interviews with my staff.
Yeah.
And I asked that exact question, you know, when was the last time you felt like leaving or whatever?
Right.
And I uncovered patterns, right? So the help desk staff, I discovered, are really stressed at the beginning of the semester.
Sure.
And
Right.
that's when they all thought about leaving, right?
Right.
So, and my AV people, winter break,
Yeah.
I don't know, you know, I'm still trying to unravel what happened over winter break.
Cramming a bunch of
Stuff went
installs.
down over winter break, you know what I mean? So that's the other advantage is like, it might not be about particular one person,
Right.
but also just about patterns
Right.
and things you can do to improve the workplace.
Right, exactly.
For everyone.
Yeah. good
Exactly.
point.
The thing that sticks out to me is the 90 days. So does that correspond with a quarter, a semester? Was that arbitrary?
I think it's fairly arbitrary.
I think it's fairly arbitrary, but I also think it's like,
Last couple months.
right, you really want like current, right? You're trying to get current information out of them, so like, you know, you don't want to know what demotivated them 6 months ago. You really want to know what motivated them, like, more recently. So, although like, the other question is like, when was the last time you felt really demotivated? You know, that might be a 6 or 9 month question, right? Depending upon what answer they choose to come up with for that.
How do you set these up? Or is this like in lieu of a one-to-one, or is this like an extra long one-to-one?
So yeah, normally what I do is I double the size of one of their ones and just do these questions instead.
And then do you give them a heads up that it's gonna be a longer conversation this time? Okay.
Yep, I let them know we're gonna do our one-on-ones, or we're gonna do our tugs, or shoves and tugs questions, right?
All right.
I let them know, right? So they know, they have.
So at MechDive, we were actually, for years, we were actually emailed a Word document with all the questions. So
Okay.
like, we could type in our answers, and I don't remember if we actually emailed it back
Yeah,
or if we just
Word.
talked about it. But I think over the last couple of years, we've just been having the discussion.
Yeah.
Now, since I've been there 11 years, I have my old documents that tell me what the questions are. But if you're brand new, maybe, and obviously the questions change a little bit every year too.
I like that you gestured towards me, because like the employee that I
Yeah.
mentioned introverted, in meetings will not say anything, and then like 2 days later, they'll be like a 20-page email.
No, I'm explaining it.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
so maybe giving the opportunity to do this, maybe not in talk, but in writing.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
So then you get to, like, you can get to really blunt questions, right? Like, hey, are you thinking about quitting right now? Yes or no, right? And, you know, again, you're not gonna ask that on the first round of these shoves and tugs questions, but, you know, the goal will be to get to the point where you've built enough trust where you can, like, blunt, straight up ask them, hey, are you thinking about quitting? And, you know, if so, why? And so, you know, you can get right down to it. Now, the only mandatory question, as he put it was this. If you felt demotivated again, would you feel comfortable sharing that with me? And I think the reason that this question is so important is because, again, this goes back to that trust question, right? You know, so if the answer is no, then you got a bigger problem,
Then you
right?
got a flag.
Because now you can have disgruntledness growing, and you're never going to hear it. They're not going to tell you about it, right? And so I've never had anyone tell me no. So you know, the next question is, what would you do? So they told you no. I'm like, I don't know. And I'll cross that bridge, I guess, when I come to it, right? But yeah, no, first thing I would do is I'd go to my boss and say, okay, what am I doing wrong, right? You know, help me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's important for them to be able to know that for you to know that they trust you enough that they would bring these things to you, right? If they felt demotivated. All right. So, and then of course, then we flip the whole thing around. We'll go through these kind of quickly, right? But you know, so the indirect question here is, so what are 2 or 3 things you think other employees like best about this organization, right? And I think they do this in, you know, shoves first, then tugs, because of course you always kind of want to end with the positive, right, mentality. And then a lot of these questions that are direct, right? For tugs especially, because for tugs, you don't really need to go third person, like you're asking them, you know, about the good stuff, right? You know, and so they're gonna be more open with you to tell you these things directly. Yeah, so these are almost exactly the same questions you saw, and the other one's reversed, right? Almost exactly. You know, so again, I go back, okay, same party, same person, they turn right around and say, okay, so what's the single best part of working in IT services at Iowa State University? So what would you say, right? And get good answers from this. I do really like this last question here. Is there anything that would improve your working experience? Okay, and we're gonna get back to that question here in a second because it's part of the mandatory questions, which is here. So the bullet question here is, how do you feel about your opportunities for success here, right? And again, I think that's a really good question too, to know, do they feel upper potential? Do they feel like they have all the tools that they need to be successful? Do they feel like they're pigeonholed somewhere where they don't want to be? You know, so you can kind of learn some of those things here. But the mandatory question here, I really like this too, is that, is there anything that would improve your working experience that you think is out of my control? And here's why I really like this question, is because you will find things that they think are out of your control that they don't bring up to you because they think it's out of your control, but actually you have a lot of control to help them with that, right? And so you really, you know, you're trying to get them thinking, right? And you know, it's rare, but there are times where I'm like, you know what, I can help you with that. So I'm glad we talked about it, right? And we could, you know, kind of work them through that. So, so those are the shoves and tugs questions, and that's kind of what I put together for here. Are there any questions? You know, great questions by the way, along the way.
I have two questions
Sure.
in regards to the shoves and tugs, but I'll start with, I can't imagine, so I've never formally done a shoves and tugs. I think I've done it on some level inconsistently or as, you know, just to try to get information, but, and we do things in our team meetings where we always start them off where they have to say something positive that happened with them in the last week just to share.
Yeah.
So we do those kind of things, but if I was to get into a shoves and tugs and they literally had something really, really bad response, I can't imagine if I asked them, well, is your house currently on fire? And they go, yes. And I go, okay, thanks. I mean, how do you handle those situations when you ask a shove question and it's like a big red flag where it's bad? Do you stop and just tackle that?
You 100% have to stop, right? You know, at that point.
I'm just asking how you approach it. I think I know how I approach
Well, no,
it. I'm
like,
just
so-
curious
So again, the honest truth is, I've been fortunate enough that I've never had like something like super serious that's come out of this, right?
Yeah.
You know, by and large, it's more surface level stuff, generally speaking, that I'm hearing, right? Again, I'm super lucky, right? My team's generally happy, got a good team, they like what they do, so I'm not generally hearing like all this super negative stuff. So if I did hear it though, I mean, what I would do is, yeah, I would immediately like stop and like deep dive into whatever it was, right? It's like, okay, tell me more, let's talk about this, right? You know, how long has this been going on? You know, tell me more about it. You know, depending on what they say, questions would come at that point, right? You know, how you would continue to dig into it. But no, you couldn't just write that down and go, okay, next question, right? No. Yeah, that would, yes. Again,
I guess
part of
I'm
this
more curious if you've ever been in that.
trust and rapport. Like, yeah, fortunately for me, no, I've not been in that situation yet. But I'm sure there's a day, it'll come eventually.
And then the other piece is the criticality of the separation of the questions instead of maybe blending. You know, is it important to get all of one area done and then move it to the other?
I don't think it's like, no, I don't think it's vitally critical. I mean, I think you could certainly have some amount of creativity in blending these together. Although, like I say, you know, there's certainly some, you know, advantages to getting all the negative stuff out of the way and like ending on a positive note,
Yeah.
just from a, you know, morale perspective, you know, ending on a positive note kind of thing. But beyond that, no, I don't think there's any particular reason you couldn't like creatively blend some of these questions, right? So, I don't personally, because I'm a rule follower, this is what the book said to do, so, you know, that's how I am, right? But, yeah. Good question.
Time for one more?
Yeah.
I love the shoves and tugs. The shoves are great. We all know the probably apocryphal stat that people don't quit their jobs, they quit their managers. So my question is, how do managers successfully ask those questions, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
paraphrase Foster T. Swift, hey, hi, you're the problem, it's you. Like, I don't know, do you have HR as a resource, or do other managers or peers or something, like if someone really has a problem, and the problem is their manager asking, how are things going? That person's gonna say, fine, let's talk about tugs.
Sure.
As they make their way out the door. How do you,
Sure.
who else, how do you work?
So one of the things that we try and do at Iowa State is we do what's called a skip level meeting. So basically, my boss will meet with my team without me present. And they won't ask like specifically shoves and tugs questions per se, but they will ask, how are things going, right? And I don't know if he does this, I tell my boss, Darren, like, Darren, when you go into those, like, please ask specifically, like, what is Mike doing that he needs to do better at? And I think he's sometimes timid to ask that question outright, right? But I'm like, no, you need to ask that question while I'm not there, see what answers you get, right? Because there's no way I'm going to do better if I don't have those answers. In fact, I had one of my employees and I were not getting along great, you know, having some challenges, and actually still are, haven't completely resolved that. But I asked my boss to specifically have a personal one-on-one with this individual for the express purpose of, like, all right, and I told the employee and I told my boss, I'm like, I want you guys to be brutally honest, you know, about my performance. Like, employee, this is your chance to tell my boss what I'm doing wrong, and you know, because I'm like, I want to resolve this, and one way to resolve this is to try and, again, get back that building trust to say, you know what, I trust you enough that I'm going to let you loose on my boss to tell him everything you think I'm doing wrong. And of course, it turns out, you know, he didn't actually end up having that much to say, right? You know, but was also insightful, right? Just maybe it was more just general disgruntledness more than, but that's important to know too, right?
And do you feel like setting that example of accountability, or whatever you want to call it, at the top level, does that percolate through where, you know, like you're being vulnerable, or you're saying like, hey, you know, let me have it, and then like, does that create more of a framework for others, you know, whether they're, you know, introverted or whatever, to then kind of, you know, participate more?
I will say it it hasn't as much as I've hoped, right? So if I'm being honest, right? So it's something I'm still working on. You know, I'm still not getting I still don't think I'm quite getting as honest of answers out of them still as I would like. Particularly on the, you know, what are some opportunities for improvement question. You know, and that's the other thing that you know, and I've actually gone off on this, you know, publicly in various venues, right? Because that's my biggest pet peeve when these employees do their self-evaluation, is they never, hardly ever put anything down in their self-evaluation about what they can do better, right? And like, where I'm doing my self-evaluation, I'm like brutally honest. I'm handing my supervisor like, by the way, here's the 50 things that I know I can do better. Like, yeah, here's the 150 things I did great. But by the way, my boss, I know that these are my opportunities for improvement. And I talk to my employees about this. I'm like, you know, guys, to be honest, I'm going to respect you a whole lot more if you come to me with a list showing that you have enough self-awareness to know where your opportunities for improvement are. Then I'm going to respect you if you come to me with this glowing self-evaluation with no opportunities for improvement.
Perfect.
I am not gonna respect that near as much as the employee that comes to me and says, you know what, I know that I can get better at X, Y, and Z. You know, and so my frustration is, and this, maybe it's just me, maybe it's my personality, but you ask me 10 things that I can do better, I can name 10 things right now, off the top of my head, that I know I don't do very well, that I can get better at. And so, they need to get to the point where they're honest enough with themselves, as well as others, to be able to do that also. And that's something I'm still finding out. I don't have any magic bullets there yet, still working through that.
And a lot of that comes from the one-on-ones, right? Getting that rapport, letting them
Yeah.
think that,
Yeah,
you know, you can say, hey, I suck at this, and
Yeah.
hopefully they will reciprocate, right?
Yeah.
And
I think it's also a piece of writing goals at the start. I mean, I always tell people, because they'll say, well, how do I get exceeds expectations, right?
Right.
And it's like, well, you have to do just that, right? What are the things we have to work at to be better? Because we all can't, we're not all gonna be operating as like superstars all the time, right? But you can identify certain things and be like, and show progress and be like, hey, I really like worked hard at being better at this and I did really great. And that's another way to kind of make that meeting or exceeding expectations an attainable thing.
Yeah.
Because again, I mean, then we also have the departments who like give everybody an exceeding and then, you know, they're like, well, why don't we all get to it, right?
right,
So you have to find that outside of it, because we all use one across our university, the same performance tool. But that is another way to do that, is to kind of like have them think proactively, like let's talk about what these things are. Yes, things are gonna bubble up through the year, but what are those things that you really wanna focus on this year? And then do you meet those or not? And then you have those weekly conversations about that.
Yeah.
And that's where I have found that where they kind of start to actually talk about those things, because they want that.
yeah.
Otherwise, they're kind of just meeting expectations, and that's, you know, that's an okay thing too.
You know, the other thing I try and work with them too on is to remind them, like, okay, look, when we talk about, you know, opportunities for improvement, it's not always the things that you're bad at that you need to get better at.
Right.
There's also the things that you're already good at that you want to even get better at, right? We can also talk about those types of opportunities for improvement,
Stretch goals. and-
right? Yeah, so like, yeah, so again, some things that I know I can do better are things that I'm already pretty good at, but I know I can continue to get better at, right?
I'm a
You
good
know,
programmer, but yet I wanna learn this aspect of it.
Right.
to get
Yeah, I
better.
mean, that's kind of the strength finders thing, right? Like,
Right.
like minimize the stuff you're bad at and really make the stuff you're good at really, really good.
Right.
It's still good.
yeah,
I mean, that's still a positive, right?
right,
If there's something that they really don't like doing, and it's not like, you know, some kind of like, you know, critical thing to the organization, like, where they wanna become like really the best at this other thing.
yeah.
You know, that's,
Mike, how many staff do you have to go through this? The number?
Yep, I have 8 that well, no, actually I have 7, and I have one that does this with his employee.
Okay.
So I have 7 employees that I do this directly with, yeah, so it's. Anyway, that's it, that's all I've got.
thank you, Mike. Thank you.